He walked past the Massey Ferguson at the auction. The man who bought it took his contract. Dale Crofton had been doing custom harvesting work in Pawnee County, Nebraska for 22 years when he walked past the Massey Ferguson at the Garfield Township equipment auction in the fall of 2017. He walked past it deliberately, which is a different thing from not noticing it. He noticed it. He looked at it the way a man looks at something he has already decided against, which is to say he looked at it just long enough to confirm the decision he had already made before he arrived. The machine was a Massey Ferguson 9505 combine, late model, clean hours, full service documentation in a folder attached to the listing board. Dale looked at the documentation, looked at the asking estimate, and walked to the other end of the auction yard where a Case IH unit with considerably more hours and considerably less service history was sitting in the morning light. He bought the Case IH before noon. He drove home satisfied. He had been in this business long enough to know a deal when he saw one, and the Case IH had been a deal. The Massey Ferguson had been priced like someone thought it was worth what it was worth, and Dale Crofton had not built 22 years of custom harvesting operation by paying what things were worth. A man named Reese Alderman from Furnace County bought the Massey Ferguson 9505 that afternoon. Dale didn't know Reese Alderman at the time. He would come to know him well enough over the following 4 years, in the specific and uncomfortable way that a man gets to know the person who is systematically taking his business. Pawnee County custom harvesting is not a glamorous market. It is a market built on relationships, on showing up when you said you would show up, on running equipment that doesn't cost your customer a day of harvest window because your machine decided to have a problem in the middle of his field at 2 in the afternoon. The farmers who hire custom operators in that part of Nebraska are not sentimental people. They are practical people, running operations where the margin between a good year and a difficult one is measured in days and dollars per acre, and they evaluate their custom operators accordingly. Dale Crofton had built his reputation over 2 decades on the straightforward premise that he showed up, he ran clean equipment, and he got the crop off. That reputation had given him a stable contract base of 11 primary accounts covering roughly 8,400 acres annually, plus supplementary work he picked up in strong years when the harvest ran long and smaller operators needed help finishing. It was not a spectacular business. It was a reliable one, and in custom harvesting, reliable is the thing that keeps the lights on. What Dale had not fully accounted for in the fall of 2017 when he passed on the Massey Ferguson and bought the Case IH was that reliable is also the thing that can be taken from you, one account at a time, if someone comes into your market running equipment that is more reliable than yours at a cost per acre that is lower than yours. He had not accounted for it because in 22 years, nobody had come into Pawnee County and done that to him. He had been the reliable one. He had been the benchmark. He had operated without serious competitive pressure for long enough that competitive pressure had stopped feeling like a realistic threat. Reese Alderman was 34 years old when he bought the Massey Ferguson 9505 at the Garfield Township auction. He had been doing small-scale custom work in Furnace County for 6 years. Not enough volume to build a serious reputation, enough to learn the business and understand what the business required. He had watched the Pawnee County market for 2 years before the auction because Pawnee County was adjacent to his operating range and because he had heard, through the particular grapevine that runs through every agricultural county in the Great Plains, that the dominant custom operator there was running aging equipment and had not made a significant capital investment in several years. That information was accurate. Dale Crofton's primary combine at the time of the 2017 auction was a 2009 unit with over 2,100 hours on it. Serviceable, maintained, but not a machine that inspired confidence in customers who were asked to stake their harvest on it. Reese had done his research on the Massey Ferguson 9505 before he arrived at the auction. He had not arrived at the auction intending to buy whatever looked good at the right price, which is how Dale Crofton had arrived. Reese had arrived intending to buy that specific machine if the bidding stayed within the range his financing allowed, because he had spent 3 weeks establishing that the machine's service history was legitimate, that its hours were consistent with its mechanical condition, and that the Massey Ferguson dealer in McCook could support it with the parts availability and service response his operation required. He had called the dealer before the auction. He had spoken to the service manager for 40 minutes. He had asked the same questions about harvest window response times and parts inventory depth that a man asks when he intends to depend on a machine rather than simply own it. He had bought the machine with a plan already in place, and the plan was Pawnee County. He did not arrive in Pawnee County announcing himself. That is not how these markets work, and Reese Alderman understood how these markets work. He spent the fall of 2017 and the winter of 2018 making himself known in the county through the ordinary channels, co-op meetings, elevator conversations, the particular social geography of a rural Nebraska county where word travels at the speed of whoever is standing at the coffee counter at the elevator on a Tuesday morning. He was not aggressive about it. He was present and competent, and he let those two qualities do the work that aggressive self-promotion would have done less effectively. By the spring of 2018, he had 3 conversations with farmers in Pawnee County who were either dissatisfied with their current custom arrangement or open to a secondary quote. He submitted quotes on 2 of them. His numbers were sharper than Dale Crofton's on both, not because he was cutting his margin to the bone to buy the business, but because his cost structure on the Massey Ferguson 9505 was genuinely lower than Dale's cost structure on his aging equipment. Dale Crofton heard about Reese Alderman for the first time in April of 2018, when a farmer named Gerald Pence, one of Dale's 11 primary accounts, 680 acres of wheat and corn, called him to say he was going with a different operator that season. Gerald Pence had farmed in Pawnee County for 38 years and had used Dale's custom harvesting service for 9 of them. He was not a man who made changes casually. He told Dale that the new operator had quoted him a rate that was meaningfully lower and had shown him a machine with a full documented service history and current model year that Dale's equipment could not match. He said he appreciated the years of reliable service and that he might be back if things didn't work out. He was not back. Things worked out. Dale's response to losing the Pence account was the response of a man who has been in a dominant position long enough to treat the first competitive loss as an anomaly rather than a signal. He told himself that Gerald Pence had made a short-sighted decision based on price, and that he would learn the lesson when the new operator's equipment let him down during a critical window. He told himself this with the confidence of a man who had seen younger operators come into the market before with aggressive pricing and underperform on the reliability side. He had seen it before. He expected to see it again. He adjusted nothing about his operation, made no capital decisions, and waited for Reese Alderman's equipment to fail in a way that would send Gerald Pence and anyone else back to the operator they knew. The Massey Ferguson 9505 did not fail. It ran the 2018 harvest in Pawnee County without a significant interruption, and Reese Alderman finished every acre he contracted on schedule. Word of that travels. In an agricultural county where custom harvest reliability is the metric every farmer tracks, a new operator running clean equipment and finishing on schedule is not a secret for long. By the fall of 2018, Reese had 4 accounts in Pawnee County covering just over 2,900 acres. Dale Crofton had 10 primary accounts covering approximately 7,700 acres, down from 8,400 the previous year. The math was visible if Dale had been looking at it clearly. He was not yet looking at it clearly. The 2019 season was when the Case IH that Dale had bought at the Garfield Township auction in the fall of 2017 began to demonstrate why it had been priced the way it had been priced. The machine had been a deal because the previous owner had managed it the way people manage equipment they are planning to sell. Adequately maintained, but not invested in, run hard in the final seasons before the sale, the kind of machine whose condition is better described by what isn't in the service record than by what is. By the summer of 2019, the combine was showing the accumulated cost of that management history. Dale had a separator-bearing failure on June 24th in the middle of Gerald Pence's former neighbor's wheat, which was now a Reese Alderman account. He did not have that account. He had the adjacent account, which was 540 acres, belonging to a man named Tom Wicker, who had stayed with Dale out of long-standing personal loyalty rather than competitive evaluation. The separator-bearing failure put Dale down for 2.5 days during a harvest window, where 2.5 days matters. He got the machine repaired. He finished Tom Wicker's acres. He finished them 4 days later than he had told Tom Wicker he would finish them, which was not a catastrophic delay but was a visible one. And in Pawnee County, visible delays are visible. Reese Alderman finished his 2019 contracted acres without a mechanical interruption. His account base in Pawnee County had grown to 6 operations covering 4,100 acres. Dale's base had contracted to 9 operations covering 6,800 acres. The gap was closing at a rate that was no longer possible to interpret as an anomaly. Dale sat down with his records in August of 2019 and looked at the trajectory with the honesty that the numbers were demanding of him. He had lost 2 primary accounts directly to Reese Alderman. He had lost portions of 2 others, farmers who had split their acreage between Dale and the new operator as a hedge, which is its own kind of verdict. His equipment costs per acre had increased as the Case IH aged. His repair bills had risen in each of the 2 seasons since he bought it, and the machine's reliability record in the 2019 season had given Tom Wicker a reason to have the conversation that loyalty had been postponing. Tom Wicker had that conversation with Dale in September of 2019. He was not unkind about it. He told Dale that he had been a reliable partner for many years and that he appreciated it, but that his operation could not absorb late finishes that were becoming more likely as Dale's equipment aged, and that the rates Reese Alderman was quoting were competitive enough that the decision was not a difficult one on the numbers. Dale asked him if he had actually seen Reese Alderman's operation run. Tom Wicker said he had talked to 4 farmers who had. Dale had no effective response to that. He thanked Tom Wicker for the years and drove home. He thought about it for most of that fall. He thought about the Garfield Township auction in 2017 and the Massey Ferguson 9505 he had walked past. He thought about what the machine had looked like, clean, documented, priced at what it was worth, and about the decision he had made to buy something cheaper with more hours and less history because he had been in the business long enough to know a deal when he saw one. The deal had cost him 2.5 days in Tom Wicker's wheat field in June of 2019. It had cost him more than that in the slower, less dramatic way that competitive losses accumulate. 1 account at a time, 1 season at a time. The base eroding in a way that doesn't hurt sharply on any given day, but changes the shape of the operation over years. The winter of 2019 into 2020 was the winter. Dale Crofton made the capital decision he should have made 2 years earlier. He sold the Case IH at a loss that was smaller than the loss he had absorbed in operational costs and account erosion over 2 seasons, which is a cold comfort but is still a comfort of some kind. He spent 3 months evaluating his equipment options with a seriousness of process that he had not applied in 2017, when he had arrived at an auction with a general disposition toward buying something and had bought something. He drove to 3 dealerships. He looked at maintenance records, not just on the floor models, but on comparable units that had been traded in by operators whose use profiles were similar to his. He talked to custom harvest operators in adjacent counties about their equipment relationships and their service experiences. He talked to dealers about parts availability during the specific 3-week window in June and July when his business lived or died. He approached the decision the way Reese Alderman had approached the 2017 auction, with a plan, with research, and with clarity about what the machine needed to do and what needed to be in place to support it when it was doing it. He bought a Massey Ferguson 9600 series in February of 2020. It was not the machine Reese Alderman was running. It was the current generation of the platform Reese had bought 3 years earlier. and it carried the same fundamental advantages: strong parts availability through the McCook dealer, a service relationship Dale had established before he signed the paperwork, and a cost-per-acre profile that his updated financial model told him could compete in the Pawnee County market at rates that would recover some of what he had lost. The 2020 season was the first test of whether what Dale had lost could be recovered, or whether the competitive repositioning Reese Alderman had accomplished in 3 years was permanent. The answer, as it turned out, was somewhere between those two outcomes, which is where honest answers usually land. Dale ran the Massey Ferguson through the 2020 harvest without a significant mechanical event. His reliability record, which had been damaged in 2019, had a clean season to begin rebuilding on. His rates, recalculated on the new machine's cost structure, were competitive in a way they had not been for 2 years. He picked up 2 new accounts in Pawnee County, smaller operations, a combined 890 acres, not the primary accounts he had lost, but new relationships that had not existed before. Tom Wicker called him in April of 2020. He did not call to return. He called to offer Dale 200 acres of a secondary field that Reese Alderman didn't have capacity for in a compressed planning window. Dale took it without comment, because 200 acres is 200 acres, and because every season of clean performance on the Massey Ferguson was a season of evidence that the decision to buy it had been correct. Reese Alderman's operation in Pawnee County by the 2020 season covered 7 primary accounts and just over 5,200 acres. He had built in 3 years what Dale had built in 22, not by being more talented or more hardworking, but by arriving with the right equipment, the right cost structure, and the right service infrastructure at a moment when the incumbent operator's equipment was giving customers a reason to consider an alternative. The Massey Ferguson 9505 he had bought at the Garfield Township auction had run 4 full harvest seasons without a breakdown that cost a customer a day of their harvest window. That record was known in the county. It had been the foundation of every account conversion he had made. Dale Crofton knew this by 2020. He had not known it in 2017 at the auction, or he had known it in theory and not applied it to the specific decision in front of him, which amounts to the same thing in the ledger. He had looked at a well-maintained, properly priced Massey Ferguson with a clean service history and had walked past it because the price reflected its actual value, and he had been in the business long enough to believe that paying actual value was not how you built a competitive operation. He had been correct about that principle in the abstract. He had been wrong about its application to that specific machine on that specific day, because the cost of not owning that machine had not been the premium he would have paid over the Case IH deal he chose instead. The cost of not owning that machine had been Gerald Pence and Tom Wicker and 2.5 days in a wheat field in June of 2019, and 3 years of watching a man from Furnace County build a business in his market with the equipment he had declined to buy. By 2022, Dale Crofton's Pawnee County account base had stabilized at 8 primary operations covering approximately 6,100 acres. He had not recovered the accounts he had lost to Reese Alderman. Gerald Pence stayed with Reese. Tom Wicker ran the majority of his acres with Reese and gave Dale a portion of the secondary work each season, which was a professional arrangement and a personal verdict on where things stood. The 2 operations coexisted in the county with a clarity about their respective positions that both men understood. Reese Alderman had established himself. Dale Crofton had stabilized. The gap between those 2 outcomes was not the Massey Ferguson 9505 alone. No single equipment decision is ever the entire explanation for a business outcome. But the equipment decision was the hinge. It was the moment when a competitive window opened in Pawnee County, and it opened because Dale had bought a cheaper machine that gave customers a reason to look around, and it stayed open because the man who walked through it was running equipment that gave them a reason to stay. Dale Crofton runs his Massey Ferguson into his 7th season now. The machine has not given him back Gerald Pence. It has not given him back Tom Wicker's full acreage, or the two accounts he never knew he was losing in the slow years before the 2019 breakdown made the trajectory visible. What it has given him is a cost structure that works, a service relationship that answers the phone during harvest, and a reliability record that has stopped the erosion and given him a foundation to rebuild from. He is 61 years old, which is the same age Dale Crofton was when he walked past the Massey Ferguson at the Garfield Township auction in 2017, and that coincidence is not lost on him. He knows what the machine he didn't buy cost him. He knows it precisely because he has run the numbers with the honesty that comes from having enough distance from a bad decision to look at it clearly. He knows that the premium between the Massey Ferguson's auction price and the Case IH deal he chose instead was a number he could have absorbed without meaningful financial impact. He knows that the cost of the decision he made instead, in repair bills, in account losses, in the 3 years it took to rebuild a competitive position he should never have surrendered, was a number of a different order entirely. He doesn't tell that story at co-op meetings. He doesn't tell it at the elevator. But he tells it to himself on the mornings when he does the pre-harvest check on the Massey Ferguson before the season opens, going through the inspection the way a man goes through it when he has learned what the cost of cutting corners looks like, spread across a ledger and across the years. The machine is ready, the accounts are stable, the season is about to open. That's the only story that matters now. The other one is settled.